the question has been asked why we come back to this community again and again, the Community Bill of Rights. Well, I think of the Declaration of Independence. And in the Declaration of Independence says that we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I keep thinking of that mantra over and over and over again. And we have our rights. We have our rights to our communities. The nature has rights, and we have to fight for that. We have to fight, fight, fight until we get there.
And so you're talking about the rights for clean air,
Yes.
clean water,
Yes.
the rights to not have your community destroyed.
Yes, I am. Yes. All the way.
And why do you think you can get that?
Because I'm in community with other people that think the way I think, and there's more people out there that are going to think the way I think.
What about if a corporation says, but we can make a lot of money from your community, and we think we should have the decision-making power?
Well, they are not people. They think they are, but they're not. The Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, does not say that a corporation is a person. That's just a recent thing. We are people, and we have our rights. Environment has rights.
And we speak for each other and the environment.
Yes, we do.
I think when I went to, I'm Chris Mason, and I'm here with all these lovely people as well, and was with many others at the Community Rights Workshop that we had in Pittsburgh. I think that was the first one in Pennsylvania back in January, I think that was. I think when I left there, after having so much information, knowing some things from doing readings and talking with people that worked in a lot of organizations on a lot of different issues related to the environment, to social issues, was that it came down to sort of almost this one source in my mind, which was that we can't make decisions on a local level. The one phrase that was put out a lot was the fact that, municipal governments, local governments, pave roads. That's about all they do. And I thought about that more and really dwelled on it and thought about neighborhoods I've lived in and within the city of Pittsburgh, and then ones I know that other people live in where they don't have that ability. And then you take it further to where people are having Marcellus, shale coming in and other companies that want to frack their land, and you start realizing that at some point we have to take back, or maybe even just redevelop and rebuild upon that we have a say as well. That if we are to have a democracy, that we should have the ability to deliberate on any decision that's going to affect everyone in that community, and that it should not be decided by a board of directors from some other area or by a CEO that has properties across the world or needs another jet. That there are wider issues with energy, but there are ways to do it where it's sustainable so that we can actually make these decisions and also look at the greater good and look at the wider needs. So for me, when I left, I felt like this is something I could put a lot of energy into, in addition to the other projects I work on and with other people, because it is a very fundamental level of getting back some rights, and also then being able to decide the fate of communities and protecting our habitat. We live on the earth. It's a place where we live, and we're destroying it. So, and I say we as in the, we're all responsible to keep our habitat going, not just for us now, but for our children. And I think that's the key right there, is that we really have to make that, and I think a lot of people would agree that, yes, I want to do that. Now we have a way to try to get there.
Chris, I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit more about this idea of local people envisioning what they want for their communities rather than having their future decided by others from the outside?
Right. I think the key is just the fact that proximity. I mean, someone lives in an area, they know what they know what the issues are. They know what the exact immediate negative consequences will be. And they also know, where they want to live. I mean, I don't think anyone on earth, you would ask wants to live in a poisonous environment. so the thing is that when you take away the ability for anyone to actually, who knows, the experts, we're all experts in our own area. If you take that, the ability for them to actually talk about and give their expertise of where they live and how that will affect them, and that be part of the decision-making process, then you're not, there is no democracy, the rights are being, completely disregarded. So that's really what it's about. But I think that it connects with, you get community and community. Once people have more of a say, then other communities can learn about what the issues are in the next one over. We don't always know that either. So opening up a dialogue amongst different communities also would be very helpful, and hopefully a result of this. So
What would you like to see happen along those lines in our larger community, say on the scale of Allegheny County?
I think just more communication, having a network. Like, I know the Pittsburgh Community Rights Network is a great thing, because ultimately we need a way of communicating amongst each other and to support each other, and then maybe even provide, like, if someone's having a difficult issue so like throughout the county, all the different neighborhoods, even just in Pittsburgh, there are lots and lots of neighborhoods. So if you take it on a county level, you got even more townships and areas and boroughs that they may have an issue. Suddenly, we don't know if we have the resources or the expertise, even though we know what we need some help. Hey, we can do that for you. So it's just bringing back that local support. And so ultimately, I'd love to see that. I mean, people will still, there may still be different issues that don't always mesh amongst different areas, but still having a network where you can tap into it and just kind of touch base would be great.
Is that kind of the way you see this ordinance that we have in Pittsburgh, this community rights ordinance, kind of setting the stage for other communities to take what works for them and implementing something like that and expanding on that in whatever ways seem to make sense for that particular community?
Exactly. I think that having something that is really just a very basic principle of democracy, in a sense, it can easily be adapted to wherever people are. But it also will, just having something will maybe get people just to think about it. Some people, I wasn't thinking about it until I came to the workshop. So just getting other communities that may not know that this is even a possibility, or maybe that's what they were thinking, they didn't realize they were thinking that because it's not been something that's put out there. Mm-hmm. But then they can start thinking of it and go through it. And then if we have something in Pittsburgh, for example, they can use that as a template. And then if, eventually we have a network, and then they can use that for resources. And it just goes from there, and each place just kind of leads to something that grows on a much, when we get to a state level. So I think first is just being able to know how to do it all. We were talking earlier in this session about, training even just all of us here to know how to go about it, know how to talk to each other, reaching out different ways with communication, having a good setup with that, and really just listening. We all listening to each other, finding out what is going on in our communities, and then going from there and taking those stories and turning into actual action that will get us to a certain the goal that we want. The issue is that we've had so many years and years of divisive methods being used to keep people kind of separate from each other. I mean, even in the city, you kind of don't even know your neighbors sometimes. And so I think there are barriers with that. It's almost like it's an actual tangible barrier, but it's also intangible, where there's that thought process that we have to think as a community again, or for the first time, and cooperation, and people to understand the divisions that prevent them from doing that, and that they're not set in stone. Those divisions can be removed, but it takes a lot of time. So what is coming out from what it used to be trusted sources has now been is controlled by very specific interests. So people are not getting, they're not getting enough varied information that they can make decisions. They're getting a very biased one side of the story. And it's not to their fault, really. It's just the fact that you don't always have sources. You know, what's easily accessible is what you're going to do. You have a family, you have jobs, you have, you know, farming to do. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going to take up your time. And so independent media and is the first to getting to free press and just being able to communicate using whichever ways we can without relying on corporate media, at least at this point.
A Commonwealth court, when the issue of fracking and our rights, our right to clean air and clean water and natural communities came up, the lawyer for the state said, municipalities are creatures of the state. They're like our children. They only have the rights we give them. For example, if you have a child and you're watching the things that they're watching on television and they say, I want to watch more television, and you say no, then it's no. This was the biggest wake-up call. And we didn't see this. We didn't hear this. And it was said. And I think we have to remember that things like this are said all the time and seem to be a matter of fact where the state and the corporations come together. And imagine when we thought it was a democracy, when we thought that we were adults that could make these decisions in our communities, and finding out that that just isn't so as far as the state is concerned. The fact that a corporation can come in like the gas industry and say, we're your neighbors. They aren't our neighbors. You know, they shouldn't be able to make any part of a decision for us.
My name is Mary Beth Steislinger, and I have been involved with Community Bill of Rights Pittsburgh since I took my first democracy school that dealt with the federal Constitution, and that was amazing. It was a real eye-opener for me. I've always loved the fact that we are trying to create a democracy in this country, and learning what the initial impetus was for true democracy and how it was usurped early on by some business interests that really took democracy in another direction was a huge, huge eye-opener for me. And then to take the democracy community rights class that focused on Pennsylvania even took that to the next step. And gosh, you know, I can't wait for everyone to take this class, because I really feel like it really opens up the possibilities for our democracy in the future. I'm actually really hopeful about our democracy, and especially the direction Pittsburgh's gone in. I'm really proud to be a citizen of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And when you think about Pittsburgh's history, you know, the oil being discovered in this region, coal and steel being so huge, the business interests really, you know, booming during the Industrial Revolution here, the unions coming together. I mean, it's the perfect place, Pittsburgh, to have the first city have a community bill of rights saying, okay, we're ready for the next stage. We're ready for the next stage of the development of our economy, of our energy systems, of our democracy itself. And what I'm really excited about is this idea of community rights being held by communities who are closest to the resources that they're stewarding. Our resources here in Pittsburgh are two amazing rivers, you know, a beautiful old city, incredible aquifers, air that's gotten cleaner and cleaner over, you know, the past few decades. And you know, I'm not ready to see us regress into, you know, the next fossil fuel age. I'm ready for the next stage, which is, you know, the stage of sustainable energy, the stage of clean technology, the stage of fast public transportation, biking, livable communities, walkable communities, local businesses. That's the kind of Pittsburgh I envision. I don't want to see an industrial landscape put over our farms. I want to see organic farms spreading and, you know, moving into the city and surrounding the city and developing in ways that really make sense sustainability-wise. So that's what I think community rights are all about, envisioning what we see for our community, deciding if we want drilling in our community. In Pittsburgh, we've decided we don't want it. So what do we want? I think every community has that right to decide. It shouldn't be decided by corporations from Texas or the East Coast or, you know, some wealthy, far-off headquarters. These need to be decided by the people in their municipalities. And this is what's exciting to me about our Bill of Rights in Pittsburgh. And what I'm hoping is that we can have that discussion on the level of Allegheny County. I love southwestern Pennsylvania, and I want to see us lead the way into a clean energy future that includes clean air, clean water, clean food, and all the wonderful amenities that go along with that. The thing I like best about a community Bill of Rights is that it's really a civil rights direction, claiming that we get to decide the way our future looks. We get to decide what our laws mean. And even though maybe that isn't accepted on the level of the federal government right now, that's okay, because we know we have the moral high ground to say what we want should be the direction that's chosen by the community.
Oh, yeah.
What would you say to members either of, you know, let's say your community or a different community that didn't have the same vision of the community that you would want to see as a result of having the decision making come back to a local level?
I would say that that's okay. You know, every community should decide, as long as it really is it is a deliberative democratic process where all voices in the community can come together and share what is important to them. To me, that would be the most powerful thing that we could see happen in Pittsburgh, in Allegheny County, in surrounding communities all around. If people really came together in deliberative democratic ways where they had access to the best information about, you know, what's happening in our water systems or what could happen with our water systems. If they had the best information about, for instance, the idea that concrete has a 100-year lifespan, and, you know, if you're putting all these chemicals down into a fracking well, and even 100 years from now, that concrete, you know, that's the best case scenario, that concrete would deteriorate and pollute the water systems of that community. To me, that just doesn't seem like that makes sense. So I think if communities really had the ability to make the best decisions for themselves, they would decide which energy systems made the most sense. Is gas drilling the best way to go? Is transitioning to wind and solar and geothermal perhaps going to create more long-term jobs and long-term thrivability for a community? I don't know. That's up to each community to decide. But I certainly know that I would like to have those experts answer those questions before, you know, a particular decision was forced upon us and all of a sudden we're running down this road that I don't even know all the details about. So for me, it's about getting the best information possible, and if the gas industry thinks they have the best information possible that can show a good opportunity, well, then come together in an open, transparent deliberation, and let's all talk about it. And if everyone decides that's the best route to take, well, then that's the best route to take. But I haven't seen that happen yet. All I've seen is people going behind each other's backs, offering deals to one neighbor and then another neighbor, and telling another neighbor that, well, these people signed, so you better sign. That doesn't sound like transparency or democracy at all. That sounds like bribery to me. It sounds like a lot of subversive action. And to me, that's not going to get us to a sustainable future, and it's certainly not going to strengthen our communities.
So you're talking about making decisions together as a community, and I've heard you talk before about consensus building and deliberative democracy. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, I know one of the things that I've come across in the research and work I do writing for the Commons movement is this idea of deliberative democracy projects that have been done. I know the University of Stanford's done quite a few projects along these lines where a really tough, divisive problem or issue is being, the community is really struggling over it. And I would say probably that would be fracking for western Pennsylvania and the whole shale gas region. So what if we took this really divisive issue, let's call it what energy systems will really make sense for our future here. And let's have the best of the gas industry talk with the best of the solar industry and the wind industry, and let's talk about the real science of, water hydrological systems and air, air systems, and let's really look at what are all these issues. Let's really look at long-term economic development for a region. I'm not just talking about the next 20 or 50 years. I'm talking about 3 or 4 generations. What is really what are the best decisions that we need to think of if we're going to make decisions that are truly going to be beneficial for our children and our grandchildren? To me, we need that real deliberation. We need to take the time to develop a plan that we can all be happy about. Will that include some natural gas? I don't know. Let's have that open and informed debate within our communities. I think that's what people in the United States really want. We want to be able to be heard. We want our concerns aired, and we really want the opportunity to get the best information to make an informed decision. We don't want anyone else making these decisions for us. So the University of Stanford makes these wonderful plans for these deliberative democracy sessions where they might invite 100 people from a region to come to a roundtable discussion over a long weekend to really talk to all the experts and to hear about models that have worked well in certain places and things that have gone wrong and things that are possible. And the community can ask questions of these experts. They can deliberate with each other, conservative with liberal, old person with young person, rich person with poor person. All people are invited to the table to make this decision. It seems to me that what has happened is more and more power has been focused in fewer and fewer outlets. People are given certain bits of information and other information is left out. They may, right now, the fossil fuel industry has billions of dollars that they can put into public relations and advertising, whereas, voices of community are a small voice saying, wait a minute, where's all of the options? Where is all the information that we need to make an informed decision? And so, I think our chance right now is to demand these opportunities for true deliberation, where all sides can come together and really decide what is the best for everyone, not just the few who are going to profit from a certain decision that no one else had input on.
How about our legislators? We elect people every so often, and we hear a lot of promises, and we know that the gas industry has a lot of money. This is a real problem for us, and they tell us that they're doing the best for us all the time. Have you seen a lot of good stuff coming from our legislators that would lead you to think that deliberative democracy is what they'd like to see?
Well, truthfully, no. I mean, to me, one of the best examples right now is what's happened with our county airport. I mean, how can a few people just decide that something that really is a resource that all of us should be able to access and have input on, a county airport, how can that all of a sudden be leased off to the highest bidder with no kind of community input? To me, that just seems a great example of just complete disregard for community planning, community envisioning for the future. So I would really ask Rich Fitzgerald and people like him, where was the community input? You held a hearing, and once again, the decision was already made before the people even got to the hearing. So in my mind, these regulatory hearings where people can come and make a few decisions about, how tall the drilling rigs are going to be, doesn't make any sense at all. We need to take a few steps back and go to the initial question, which is, do we even want this particular practice, Marcellus drilling in this case, happening in our community? Let's start there. What do we really want for our community in the future? Those are the kind of if we had real servants in government, those are the kind of gatherings I think they would host. A real deliberative democracy session where people's concerns and visions for the future were really addressed. You know, if everyone came to a deliberative democracy session with the sense that we're going to come to the best possible solution as a community, something that's best for all of us, not just best for the few, something that's best for the 99%, not the 1%, then I think anything's possible. Because if the 99% can come together with open hearts and open minds, you know, a true sustainable future, a true future that we can all move forward together is possible.
For me, on one level, really an issue of freedom, and the freedom that we have as individuals and as a group, as a community. I want to say a community of people living together, and not just people and all the rest of the living community here. The freedom we have to develop in our own way as we see fit, or according to our nature, and not as opposed to having decisions made by some fictitious entity like a corporation who does not live here and does not care about this place or these living beings, us, who are basically coming in, say, with the fracking and colonizing this area. I don't want to be colonized, and I think I should be able to make decisions for myself, and together with the other people in my community. I think we have the intelligence, the ability, and the right. It's about reclaiming our rights and making decisions according to what's sane and healthy for us, for our area. I mean, I have a deep connection to this land. I grew up in western Pennsylvania on the Allegheny River, and I grew up swimming in Crooked Creek and boating, and so yeah, I have a very deep connection to this land. And when I say health, making decisions with our health and sanity in mind and heart, I always think about the way the word health is related to the word whole and holy, and that we need to make decisions with the whole in mind, the whole shebang, the whole, the whole living system, and someone from the outside who does not live here clearly is not going to be making a decision with the whole in mind. They're going to be making decisions with the bottom line in mind for their stockholders or themselves. And also, we were talking earlier about when we were talking about decision-making processes in democracy. You know, a lot of people think it's just fine to leave the decisions to the government, the politicians, and we always have to recognize that the politicians aren't necessarily going to have the whole in mind, and that, I mean, I'm stating the obvious, but when they're bought off by the corporations, such as the gas and oil corporations, then clearly they're not thinking about what's best for all. So.
Right.
Well, we've been talking a lot about democracy here today, and I think the thing for me is to try to personalize this and try to think what it means to me. And when you say to people, well, we don't really have a democracy, and they say, well, of course we don't. We have a representative government. And then it sort of comes back to me as like, well, what is it then? Is democracy, you put a question out there and then you take a vote and the majority rules? Is that democracy? And recently we've been studying a book by Parker Palmer called Heart of Democracy. And I think I've become aware that democracy is something else besides just a vote. It's from your heart, and it has to do with your community, the community around you, and how you interact with those folks. And actually, the voting part is kind of just the end point. It's just how to get something done. It doesn't really have that much to do with democracy, deep democracy itself. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, and I think whatever we can do as a group to learn more about how to practice democracy and what it really means in a deep sense, that's where I would really like to see us go with this group. But I think the concept of putting ideas out there and having thorough discussions and the interactions with people, and then putting that to the vote, I think unions are very important, because you need a voice of the people, of the workers, to oppose the management for the most part. But it's interesting in Alcoa, when I used to work there, I was not part of the union. I worked at the laboratory, but in a sense we were always cheering for the unions, because in essence the rest of us in the technical group got what the unions got. So it was kind of a strange situation. We had this union versus management, and yet those of us that worked who were not in the union were generally supportive of what the union was trying to do. So,
to me, it would really be interesting to see if in the future, if we could bring a greater vision of democracy to really include, this idea of unions, workplace development, cooperatives, decision making that was really made by groups. Bring that, that precedence forward into our decision making on the governance level for municipalities, for regions. I think both unions and cooperatives are kind of models that we have that have been well developed in the past that can come forward to help us as we kind of struggle for this time of greater input and greater responsibility spread across the community for making decisions that are best for the greater whole.
Yeah, I think that brings up a good point about power. It seems like so much of what we do is just related to power, and who has the power and who can get the upper hand, which is kind of the opposite of what we're trying to do here, which is give everybody the power, not be afraid of losing the power, but let everybody have a chance to speak and have their voice heard.
And I think that really is something that's deep in our relation for greater democracy, is this idea of what would it really look like if more of us had power. I think it's sort of along the lines of what happens in our school systems. We don't really give students a lot of power as far as their education development goes. And so we're used to this idea of going through an educational system where we don't have a lot of power, and then we come out into communities where we still don't have a lot of power. And so how do we take that next step, which I think so many of us know we need to take, that next step for greater communications within the community to bring forward a community, a local economic system that really works for more and more of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think maybe if we had some models to follow and could experience this on our own. You had mentioned earlier an idea, a way to do this. maybe people could then begin to see that this is not scary. This is something that we could really, really make work.
Which is not to say that it wouldn't be messy sometimes.
True.
Or maybe slightly chaotic a little bit every once in a while.
Yes.
But still rewarding in the end, and a positive overall thing.
I was listening to Joe talking about a new model that's needed for the workplace, and I think there is a new model. It's called a cooperative, and there's two giant men in our community who are bringing a new model to Pittsburgh. Carl Davidson and Charlie McAllister are going to be talking about the Mondragon model of cooperatives that's really the rage in Spain right now. And they're bringing that to Pittsburgh, and they're going to be talking about it at the Pump House in Homestead on May 17th. So we want a lot of people to be there so they know what a cooperative is and how it works and how it's going to help the people in Pittsburgh. There's quite a few people that in the Basque region of Spain that were didn't have real good jobs, so they just came together and formed these cooperatives, and it's just taken over. It's like wildfire. So and then the two gentlemen I was talking about thought that it was a good idea to bring that to Pittsburgh and let other people know what cooperatives are like.
We aren't trained for democracy, and our institutions aren't trained for democracy. Right now we have a corporatocracy. We don't have a democracy, and so we have all our educational systems are all geared to working for corporations. If you go to college, it's about working for a corporation. Mm-hmm. We learn to go along and get along from the very our earliest stages. You know, we have a lot of people who work at homeschooling just for this kind of reason. You know, we'd love to have institutions that were like homeschooling, where people did learn how to be in a democracy very early on, who learned how to love, to learn what peace is about. You know, so when we talk about things like Citizens United or the Community Bill of Rights, we're talking about people who really can feel and know and love it, and love what this means. Karen, do you want to talk a little bit about what it is to be in this world, evolving through centuries to come to this place of love and care for each other and for the world and the earth?
Wow, that's a big question.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, but you know, here we are.
Well, we were talking earlier a little bit about how over 13 some billion years, every living being has evolved according to its own nature. It has unfolded according to its own nature. And that's what I was talking about earlier, as we as individuals and we as a community organism, as a social, political group organism, need to evolve according to our own nature. And that's worked all this time. Here we are, we're in this amazing world. We could destroy it under corporatocracy. We could have this industrial production come in and lay itself over our entire world here in Western Pennsylvania, or we could reach deep down into that place where we do connect and we do really care and we do feel the grief because of what's happening. We do open our eyes, we do acknowledge, and we feel that grief and anger or fear or rage or whatever it is, because because we care so much, because we know where we feel how deeply connected we are. I mean, how could we not be? We all are, because we evolved out of this, and this is our larger body. There's no way we can really not be connected to all this. So to tap into that, and to again acknowledge how the whole way of the world has been to self-unfold, that's not what I want to say, to unfold according to our own nature. And that's what we're talking about, we as a community doing, as opposed to having someone else make decisions and put laws on us as if they are our parent, that the whole patriarchal mindset makes no sense. That's where the insanity comes in. The sanity is being grounded and taking the responsibility and claiming our freedom for ourselves.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, being kind of taught almost that we are incapable and that we have to realize that we are capable. On an individual level, but also as we usually have a lot more capacity once we have more people involved. So there's that whole idea of just the one size fits all that we get from, the government, but primarily from the kind of corporate machine, I'll call it, where everything is prepackaged for you, everything's done, they think for you, you don't have to make decisions really. So there is that almost something we have to overcome in general with that we have to realize that we do have the capability, that we have to go back into ourselves a little bit and think about what is real, what we really want, and that we do want to be healthy, that we are connected to the earth. We are living beings just like all the other living beings on the earth, and we need the air and we need the water to actually survive. Otherwise, we die. That's a very basic concept, but for some reason, at some point, things got a little out of whack. Someone saw the ability to have control over those resources in order to gain something that doesn't really even exist, like money. And so we have to sort of become more capable and then come together and then realize that even in deliberative democracy, we're not going to have a one-size-fits-all. However, we will get to a point where some of those very basic main issues like clean air and water and land that are essential to our survival, that we can come together on a lot of different things. And then from there, communities can work out for themselves the things that they want to have in their community otherwise. But we need those basic needs met, otherwise we will perish. And I don't think anyone really wants that, right? So
Thrive. We want to thrive, not perish. Can I make one connection with what you were saying, Wanda, earlier? I forget how you said it, but just the way that we have not been taught really to live in a democracy. We haven't been taught so much to think for ourselves. That's not exactly encouraged in our school system. And just wanted to make the point that really our compulsory school system was set up by the industrialists in the late 1800s and to produce people that would work well in the workforce, that knew how to sit in rows, that knew how to take orders, and that knew that what are the basics that we study in school, reading, writing, and arithmetic, which were the skills that were needed, the clerical skills, the kind of skills that were needed to work in that industrial factory situation. So the whole way we grow up, and we are geared to go to school. We are geared from before we're born, what school district are we going to buy our house in so that our kids can go to this or that school and then get into this or that college and get this or that job so that they can make money and buy things. But so if we really did have the freedom, again, I'll say, to think for ourselves and to learn the way we naturally learn, this could be a whole different world. So just to question that, or just to realize how we have been trained and how we may not really be living in the democracy that we think we are. We may not be claiming the using our skills. We may not. What do I want to say?
Be accessing our,
Be accessing what we
our true potential.
our true potential. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, which one of us would assume that it was okay to go to war for oil? I mean, really think about it,
Yeah.
and we have our kids that keep going through school like this, and then somebody says, well, we have to go to war for oil because it's all red, white, and blue, has a flag on it. All right. This is not something that we would choose. And I think once we get to the base of who we are and what the earth is and so on, there's no way we would choose to ruin the earth, kill people, and do this for oil. So, this really does connect with democracy, the world, and what we want for everyone and everything and in the world.
Yeah, and I think that's really where we're at. We're at a decision point right now in the world, and we each have to make it in our own local places. I think that's what the Transition Town movement's about. I think that's what the permaculture movement's about. It's all about us claiming what we do want for our local communities, making decisions that'll take us places that we do want to go
Right.
in our local communities. And we want to support other people in their local communities having that right to make those decisions. And really that's, how the world could develop in such a way that made a lot of sense for our children. Places that were safe because we were allowing people to really make those decisions and supporting people, sharing information about good decisions, healthful decisions, sane decisions. And to me, that's at the very core of this community rights work. It's all about getting people the information and showing them what's possible so that they can make decisions that are best for them and their place, their local places.
Well, I think it's also about being active instead of being passive, instead of being consumers, whether it's being mindless consumers of energy, because we do waste a lot of energy, and being aware, just for that one example, being aware of the energy that we use and being more appreciative of it, maybe setting up systems where we have more direct access to our energy, where it's not that we flip on a switch and we're not really thinking about the fact that this electricity, this light is happening because of a mountaintop that was blown off in West Virginia. That's not all that far away, but if we did have local energy systems and we were connected to them, we would be aware and appreciate them a whole heck of a lot more. So instead of being passive consumers or passively passively letting other people make decisions for us, as in politicians, our government officials, we just go and we do our duty by voting. No, it's a matter of being an active participant in our world in every way. And to me, that it's about being more alive. To me, that's really rewarding. It's challenging. It's not that, like I said before, it could be messy. There could be chaos. It could be aggravating or worse. But and I think that's what a lot of people are afraid of. That it could be contentious. Yes, people aren't always going to agree, but that's where we need to do our work to learn conflict resolution skills, to learn consensus-making processes, to learn nonviolent communication, to learn to work together at the group level in a way that, again, takes the whole into consideration. We have to learn to work and live and love together as a group, as a community, as a whole.
To really care and respect for our and respect our neighbors.
Amen.
Well, I was just gonna, add on quickly, but to quote from Spider-Man.
All right.
But no, with power comes responsibility, and ultimately that is what it's about. Being responsible for yourselves, for your fellow human beings, for your children, for your parents, for your friends, all of that, but then having it extend across the globe, because we have seen a challenge, but there's also an opportunity of shifting and transitioning to something that's more sustainable around the whole planet. Globalization has not been good for anyone. That's the new term now for colonialization.
Yeah.
And the problem is that you have the one side where you get a lot more people are able to connect because of technological advancements, more information is available, but then we see more control of that information because what? Oh, people get together, they start realizing that we have a lot in common with every other human being than we realize. And also relocalizing economies and, where people in other countries are having their farmland, whether it be more recently or 100 years ago, taken or bought from them, so they cannot subsist on their own land either. So, and they have to sell it, or it's been taken away from them. And you have starvation, you have poverty. And I know a lot of people don't want that, and there is a connection that we have. So I think that we all have to be responsible. And the first step to that is to start being responsible for creating a way for us to make the decisions. Then we start telling our politicians, and those are supposed to represent us, this is what we want. And then that kind of translates to the rest of the world. We're putting pressure on. We can say we do not want you to be stationed in another country to protect oil because we would rather have more sustainable methods that can be done here or can be worked out diplomatically with, in collaboration with other countries, as opposed to using death and destruction to kind of just maintain this very non-localized, unhealthy environment that's everywhere. And it would, just kind of, the United States doesn't have the greatest reputation around the world, but but there's good people in this country, and I think everyone deserves to have that be seen for everyone else, and vice versa from other countries. So there is that aspect too, I see, and we're charting that as we go. I think with the Egyptian revolution, the uprising that happened, that sort of got people thinking that we have this ability to come together, and maybe it won't always be right the first time, and unfortunately there will be, hopefully in our case, we're lucky where we can do this without having to worry about snipers or something like that. I mean, about violence from the state. If we're talking about, comparing it to there. But people still just decided, and so I think everyone was probably seeing, even though it's been years and years and years in the making, a turning point where people were willing to get up and say, no, we do not want this anymore. And not just a want, but we don't need this anymore. This is not leading us anywhere that is going to be good for us here. And of course, people around the world saw that and started to look at themselves maybe again, or they had already been doing that and said, we don't want this either. And that's that's the thing with any change, there's steps, and sometimes the baby steps that start. So it did start with that. The Occupy movement, I think it was really great to see because it was just a global thing almost immediately. You had Occupy movements showing up in all kinds of cities all over the world. I think there was at least 1,800 cities around the world that had an Occupy movement, whether that was 10 people or thousands of people. And it reignited and reawakened, I think, people from a sort of sleep of everything's fine, this imagined prosperity that unfortunately wasn't really. And starting to think, too, having that, uprising that was happening in the Middle East on a national stage where most people are whether or not they're getting the right story or not, they were still understanding and reading about and hearing about a political situation that was happening in another country, and identifying with those people was a very important thing. I mean, still a lot of work to do, but that's what I saw with that, and I thought it was great.
I really agree with Chris about that, because I was very much inspired by the whole Arab Spring, and I became involved as a supporter of Occupy in various ways, Occupy Pittsburgh. And the thing that really inspires me right now, having had that experience and knowing that there's thousands and thousands of people all over the world that had that experience, is to look for ways that people are connecting now across various actions. And along those lines, I'm very inspired by the idea that people who are being fracked here in Western Pennsylvania are thinking they're connected to people who are having mountaintop removal in West Virginia, who are connected to people who are having the tar sands in Western Canada, and people who are experiencing the silica sands mining along the Great Lakes. I just feel like, we're starting to see that we're all being forced in various ways to accept a future that's being decided for us by a very few, very powerful people. And yet we've sensed our power. We've sensed our ability to collaborate and cooperate across various disciplines and fields of interest. And I think it's time now for people to come together from their various perspectives to say, how can we get together on our local levels and create something that really is a model, or is an experiment of how we can really make decisions together in community. And Pittsburgh's working on that right now, and so are 150 other communities across the Northeast that also have their community rights. So there's 40,000 people signed up right now to do civil disobedience, to take the moral high ground, to say, like Gandhi suggested, this is not right. Stop. There's another way. And, that's the power that we have. We have that moral power of, sanity and health and wellness and community love that can stand in the way of the bulldozers and the drills and the heavy equipment, to say this is not the future we choose.
It's a mighty hard road that my poor hand has hold. My poor feet has traveled a hot, dusty road. Out of your dust bowl and westward we rolled, and your desert